I declare bankruptcy! Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Greg and Leisa Show. I'm Greg.
And I'm Lisa. And our topic today is
Bankruptcy.
Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. After the Christmas holiday, we figured a lot of people probably broke the bank and could probably use a little discussion on this topic.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Obviously, overspending on Christmas gifts. Someone could have lost a job, illness, or just, general struggling financially.
Yeah. And there's always questions regarding bankruptcy as far as the process, which chapter 7 or 13 fits your financial situation, and what are the consequences for filing bankruptcy.
So once again, just before we get into all this, disclaimer, we are not attorneys, and we're only going to discuss the process and a little bit about how bankruptcy works. As you learn this process, it will give you a little familiarity that will help you feel more comfortable when meeting with an attorney, which we are not.
Yep. But in 2023, there were 416,607 non-business bankruptcy filings. And that's a 13% increase over 2022, which had 370,685. But also the business bankruptcies increased in 2023 by 30%. So that tells us that, after having almost a decade of lower filings, that the filings are starting to increase again.
Yep. So let's, off the bat here, we talk about Chapter 7, we talk about Chapter 13. I'd like to someday know what happened to Chapters 1 through 6, but, the main ones we're talking about here, what is the difference between Chapter 7 and Chapter 13?
Well, Chapter 7 is basically considered a straight liquidation. That's where you include all your debts and your assets in the bankruptcy itself.
Okay.
Chapter 13 is a repayment plan. Usually if you have some residual income at the end of the month, but it's not enough to pay all your bills, you'll pay that amount into a Chapter 13 trustee who will pay your bills through the bankruptcy. And Chapter 13 plans can last anywhere from 3 to 5 years.
Wow. So how do you know which chapter to file?
Well, a lot of times it goes back to your assets. Because in a Chapter 13, a lot of people file Chapter 13 if they have assets that they want to keep. They want to, repay a portion of their debt. Chapter 7, basically, if you do not have any residuary income to pay your bills, then a lot of times Chapter 7 is the best way to go. But a lot of people think that if you file Chapter 7, you don't get to keep your house, you don't get to keep your car, etc. But you do. It just depends on how much equity is in your house and the dollar amount on the exemptions that are filed that are basically regulated through the federal court system. So, just as an example, if your house was worth $100,000 and you owed $80,000 on it, it's, you would think you had $20,000 equity, and you don't want to lose that equity. But maybe the state exemption is $1,250, $12,500 per wife, husband. Then you would actually have $25,000 in exemptions between husband and wife. So you wouldn't lose your house.
Good. Well, cool. Yeah, and that's the type of stuff when you meet with an attorney, they can kind of counsel you on which way you should go.
That's right.
Which way one might be best.
Right. And, there are things that, within the bankruptcies that, allows you to be able to keep your house or keep your car.
Sure.
Like reaffirmation agreements, and we'll talk about that in a little bit.
So just to start out, if it becomes necessary to file bankruptcy, what are the first steps?
What do you think you need to do first? And you're going to need this information when you schedule an appointment with an attorney, but you need a list of all your assets, all your bank accounts, all your charge cards. You need to have their name, their address, your account numbers, anything and everything that the attorney is going to need to file in the bankruptcy petition itself. So you need to have an itemized list, because once you file bankruptcy, all your creditors are going to get a notice that you have filed bankruptcy. So that's the first information you want to do. You're going to have to get, pay stubs, current balances, and a lot of times they're going to want either the last 3 months prior to the bankruptcy filing. Some want as much as 6 months on
Okay,
balances.
sure.
And we're going to discuss that, in a further question on down the road too, on why they want, 3 to 6 months of your balances.
Sure. So if you file bankruptcy, what can happen to your credit?
Well, bankruptcy is actually in federal court, and it is a legal filing, so it's going to be on your credit for a minimum of 10 years.
Okay.
It takes it 10 years to come off. Now, a Chapter 7 filing, if you were looking to get future credit, tells a creditor if you should try and, get additional credit after you have filed bankruptcy, that you went straight liquidation. So a creditor might be a little more leery on whether they want to loan you money.
Sure, certainly.
Because you did a straight 7. Now, if you did a Chapter 13 and you were repaying a portion of your debt, then, a new creditor will think, well, you know what, you were at least trying to attempt to repay.
Sure.
So it does show on your credit, but also on a Chapter 7 filing, you can only file them like once every 6 years.
Sure. And then we touched on this, but can somebody keep their house and their car in a Chapter 7? And the answer is maybe.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
So bankruptcies have trustees. What are the responsibilities of these bankruptcy trustees?
The bankruptcy trustee's job is to make sure that there are no assets out there that they could collect to gather money to pay creditors. If a Chapter 7 trustee does an appraisal on your house and you said it was worth $100,000, but he did an appraisal on it and it came back at $120,000 instead of the $100,000 that you thought, well, even with your exemptions, you still have $20,000 in equity.
Sure.
Okay, so at that point in time, the trustee's, responsibility is to open up an estate for that Chapter 7 filing and try and recover that $20,000. Now, his options is to sell the property and get that $20,000 out, or he can work out a payment agreement with you to pay that $20,000 into the Chapter 7. So his job is to gather assets if they're there, and then to distribute that money to the creditors accordingly. Okay.
Yep.
And in a Chapter 13 trustee, their job is to make sure that it's a fair plan. Your attorney filed a fair plan, and that they are going to collect your monthly Chapter 13 payment, the trustee is, and they are going to disperse to all the creditors their portion of the money that they collect.
Sure. So I would assume there's a lot of communication between yourself and the attorney and the trustee and the attorney as well. Yep.
Right. Because the trustee is responsible for the bankruptcy filing in the bankruptcy estate.
Yep.
And the attorney is responsible for representing you as the debtor.
Gotcha. So obviously you need a good attorney. How would you go about finding a good attorney if you can't just turn to you like I could and say, where can I find a good attorney?
Yeah. Well, there's lots of ways. A lot of times if you go the bar association, your local bar associations will, sometimes do an attorney referral. Somebody that may, have somebody that they could recommend. And a lot of times I always tell people the same thing that I tell people when they're looking for a real estate agent is interview 2 or 3 attorneys.
Sure.
And find out, who attorneys charge different prices. So you could, maybe find one attorney that will file a bankruptcy for you for maybe $500, $600, $700, and another one might want $1,250. And then again, also the price is, a Chapter 13 has usually more hearings and more legal status, work to do than base Chapter 7. So you also have to, call around, do some checking. When you get done listening to this, you can call attorneys' offices and then you can have questions to ask.
Sure.
That will kind of help you decide. But that's the best thing. If you're not familiar with, bankruptcy filings or you don't work in the industry, some people just specialize in bankruptcy. And if they just specialize in it, they're usually more familiar, more up to date, will be able to provide, a good service for you.
Sure. And just so you guys know, when she says go to the bar association, she doesn't mean go to the local hole in the wall. Maybe you'll find a lawyer in there, but probably not probably not the best place to start.
Yeah. You want to go to the legal association.
The legal bar association.
Yeah.
So, just kind of topic here we mentioned earlier. What are reaffirmation agreements? I know you mentioned it.
Well, reaffirmation agreements, and in Chapter 7 is like if you decided you wanted to keep your house, what you would do is sign an agreement with your mortgage holder, and it's a reaffirmation agreement, which means you are reaffirming the debt. You want to keep the house, you're going to make your mortgage payments, and you are going to just act like the bankruptcy never existed. That, and they are going to have you sign that agreement, and it's recorded with the courts.
Okay.
Okay. That also makes you responsible for later on down the road, if you are in default, you still are responsible for remaining balance if they go through foreclosure. So if you don't have a reaffirmation agreement, the creditor's stance or action is strictly against the collateral. So if you do not have a reaffirmation agreement, we talked about this in the creditors collections and recovery show, that they can come against your house. I can't really send you any notice to collect a debt. I have to foreclose to get my money back because my collateral is the house. So but if you wanted to, the same with the car, if you wanted to keep your car, you would do a reaffirmation agreement, and your attorney will also work with you on these agreements to make sure that they're fair and equitable toward you.
Absolutely. So. And then kind of moving right along here, what are proof of claims?
Proof of claims are in Chapter 13. Remember when I said you needed a whole list of your creditors?
Yep.
Well, in order for a creditor to get paid out of that Chapter 13, they have to file a proof of claim, and that proof of claim is that you really owe that money. What the balance is, you have to provide the original note, the mortgage, anything pertaining to that debt. If it's a credit card, you have a balance, they have to provide the information showing that they are entitled to that money and that they want to be included in this plan. Okay. So there are timelines to all those filings. So if a creditor misses that timeline, then they probably are not going to get paid in that plan.
Sure. Okay.
So it's very important that creditors, once they get notice, that they stay on top of their business as well if they want to recover some funds.
Sure.
So
absolutely. So these creditors, can a creditor collect, say I file a bankruptcy, can a creditor continue to collect from me after I file?
Well, then the answer is no. Once you file a bankruptcy, there's called a relief from stay. That means that they can no longer collect from you as long as that relief from stay is in existence. So they can't call you, they can't send you notices.
Sure.
Everything on the creditor side stops. Okay. Now, if you don't make a payment, you don't keep paying, then I, as a creditor, would file for a motion for relief from stay, because there is a stay on that says, they can't collect from you. I have to file for relief from stay in order to proceed to get the collateral or pick it up and do what I can do to recover money on that end.
Good. So, yeah. And that does sound good because it's, obviously if you declare bankruptcy, you've, probably made some mistakes somewhere along the way, but still trying to be treated fairly and having a lot of representation and a lot of legal process around all this stuff.
Right. And the whole, a lot of times you're pushed into filing bankruptcy by a creditor that's harassing you, or, and you're doing your best. And part of the bankruptcy filing is to give you that relief from the creditors while you sort out your financial situation, either through Chapter 7 or Chapter 13.
Yep.
But if things cross in the mail, or even because things are filed electronically, you may file today, but a creditor has already have an automated system that has sent you notice out that's going to cross. But, if you should have any of that, happen to you, then you just need to call them and say, here's my attorney's information, give them their name, their phone number, give them the bankruptcy case number. And as soon as they have notification of that, they are to stop. So you have to really, so as soon as you have that information, you need to let them know
which I can imagine be kind of interesting because a lot of these calls are automated. So to get on there and actually get a person to tell this to is
right.
could take a little bit.
Yeah, it could. But also you got, because collection calls are usually on the robocall system, and they're automatically dialing you from the time that you file and it's there. But if they continue to call you or send you letters and they have received notice, then they can be responsible for I don't want to say punishment, but punitive damages that will show them that they acted not within
Well, sure,
the
because if
law.
you've declared bankruptcy, you're
Mm-hmm.
taking a burden on yourself, really. So
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be fair to
Right.
everybody's agreeing on this legal process. Wouldn't be
Right.
fair to step outside that and harass somebody.
Right.
So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but what are exemptions?
Exemptions are part of the bankruptcy laws and regulations, basically, that say how much you are allowed to keep. And states are different, federal is different, but the federal will supersede. But there are different things. Some courts will let you, because like the bankruptcy courts are divided into districts, and the
Okay.
federal courts are divided into districts.
Mm-hmm.
So our district is the Sixth Circuit.
Okay.
And so there are some of the courts that allow you to, keep your clothes, keep your car, depending on the number of exemptions in the equity. And so that's why your attorney will know all the exemptions and your location, and they will be able to look out for your best interest.
Sure.
So,
So this next one that we're going to talk about, I can kind of reason what it might be, but what is pre-bankruptcy planning?
pre-bankruptcy planning is where they go after, which is why I said earlier that you might need 3 to 6 months worth
Mm-hmm.
of statements. That's for people that think that they're going to go out and spend all their money, charge all the credit cards up to their highest max, and take advantage of the system and then file bankruptcy. Okay, so as a creditor, especially on the credit card side, there are people that will go out and charge their attorney's fees to pay their attorney.
Oh,
Then they'll
yeah.
turn around and file
Yeah.
bankruptcy. Well, if it's considered pre bankruptcy planning, they can go back and file a motion in the courts and say, this was pre bankruptcy planning and we want this money back.
Sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that they look at that. The creditor obviously looks at it because they still want a recovery, because they may have lost quite a bit of money on that charge card. But there are people that actually do that, and that's why you look at at least 6 months of the statements
Right.
prior to filing.
Right.
So,
And that's, that can sound scary, but that's not something you can do by accident or by mistake. So
no.
you don't have to worry about,
Mhm.
if you're somebody out there trying to do the right thing in the process, you're not going to fall into something like that.
Right. No, not if you're doing the right thing. And that's part of, we always, talk about as Christ followers about doing the right thing. And if you're doing the right thing, you can sleep at night and you don't have to worry about things like that.
Yep. So finally, here on our little list of questions, what is bankruptcy discharge?
That's at the end of your bankruptcy. You'll get a notice from the courts which says bankruptcy discharge. And that basically means that your case is closed and it is over. On a Chapter 7, depending on the court system, you're looking at probably 5 to 7 months for your bankruptcy to go from start to finish.
Okay.
Once you file a bankruptcy, Chapter 7, and even in Chapter 13, you'll have what's called a 341 hearing, or it's the first meeting of creditors. And that first meeting of creditors is where you, as the client, and the attorney and the trustee will get together and they will review your bankruptcy case together.
Sure.
And so that also, creditors are allowed to attend that hearing, and they have access to your petition that's filed and to see what your assets are. So the creditor also has the ability to ask questions. And a lot of times, it's at that hearing too that, if there was a reaffirmation agreement or something that was going to be done, it would take place a lot of times at that hearing. So you start with the hearing, but usually at the end, you're just going to get your notice, and it's going to come at the end of your Chapter 13 plan when everything has been paid for. And when I say everything has been paid for, it doesn't mean that you're paying your debt back 100%.
No, of course. Yep.
Because on your unsecured debt, you may only end up paying 5 or 10%, 20% of what your credit card or unsecured debt is. But you'll get your discharge notice, and it's always good to keep those notices,
Oh yeah.
because then
Yeah.
on down the road, as you start to get, you want to apply for another credit card and you want to do something, it's good to have that
All right.
notice
Or
to
if it's been
provide.
10 years and it looks like it's still hanging around on your credit report, having
Yeah.
a document to go to bureaus and stuff
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
is
So,
absolutely.
but
So I lied. That wasn't the last question. What does the Bible have to say about bankruptcy and not paying our debt?
well, the Bible has told us, and a lot of the Bible verses that we discussed in the collections, the creditors, and the
Yep.
recovery, talks about, even like in Psalms 37:21, it says, "The wicked borrower do not repay, but the righteous give generously." The Bible tells us in multiple places that we're not supposed to go into debt and we are supposed to repay our debt. But in Deuteronomy chapter 15, it does talk about where at the end of 7 years you're supposed to release any debt that is owed to you. And if your neighbor, and because this is back in Bible times
Sure.
too,
Sure.
that if there was a neighbor that you had lent money to, and at the end of the time, the 7 years, and they still owed you some, you're supposed to release that
Sure.
debt.
And the context there, I would think, is more of a smaller, like, I gave somebody a bit of money to do
Yeah.
something with, obviously in the ancient world there, we didn't
Mm-hmm.
have credit. Not that the concept of credit didn't exist or borrowing, but
I
it
don't think they
was,
had credit
well,
cards.
yeah, it wasn't as big of a
Yeah.
thing, right? So it was more
Right.
like my
Right.
neighbor asked me for something and I gave it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I guess that goes to say the fact that these bankruptcies can take 10 years and there's huge process and people can still get certain
Mm-hmm.
pieces and parts, that's not going against the word here.
No, it's not. And you know what? There are legitimate reasons for filing bankruptcy. And, it is something that you really have to pray about and think about. Because, in back in the day, bankruptcy was stigmatized, and it was something that a lot of people tried not to do because they didn't want the stigma that, they filed bankruptcy. But, it's one of those things that, if you have a job loss, or you have a medical terminal illness and you can't work,
Sure.
and there's a divorce, and there are lots of legitimate
There are
reasons.
major
Right.
major things that can happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And and God knows we need a house, a roof over our heads, and He knows we need a car for
Well, right.
transportation to work. And but He also has told us we prosper by the fruit of our hands.
Sure.
So we have to, look at everything. But the first thing I always tell everybody is you need to pray. You
Absolutely.
need to pray about it, because you have to have a sense of peace that what you're doing is the right thing for your financial
Mm-hmm.
situation. And is it, I always looked at, what's best for me and my kids, that we needed to take care of ourselves. Um, so, filing bankruptcy is not approved or disapproved really in the Bible, because there are legitimate reasons. But, as much as the Bible tells us we're supposed to repay our debt, some people, even after they file bankruptcy, go ahead and pay off their discharge debt, because they want that peace of mind that, they did the right thing as their
Oh,
finances
sure.
turned
And
around.
and those creditors will be happy to take that money.
Yeah, yeah,
They'll be
yeah,
more than happy to take that.
that's right.
Yep.
And then also, we talked before about putting a consumer comment on your credit bureau. So, like, if you do something like that, you could, put that positive note on your credit bureau that says, I went back and paid my creditor, even though it was discharged in
Sure.
bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So people could
Absolutely.
see,
Yeah.
your
Yeah,
integrity.
and obviously something like that, we're talking about paying maybe 5, 10, 20% of certain things. So we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about a lot of money. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
coming off of bankruptcy, I would say don't necessarily rush to
No,
rush
you
to do that.
right.
But
You
if you
need
get yourself on
right.
better footing after a couple of years,
Right, right.
sure,
And as a part of bankruptcy filing nowadays, there is credit counseling that you are
sure.
responsible for going through. And that's, an important key too.
So, if we want bankruptcy to be a last resort, this credit counseling that you're talking about as part of a bankruptcy process, you can do that beforehand, right? That
Right.
can be something you seek out before you engage this
Yes.
process.
Right. Because if you don't seek it out ahead of time, that's going to be one of the things you're going to have to do as part of the bankruptcy process. But you really need to look at, before you make that decision, because a 10-year ding is a long time
Oh,
on
sure.
your credit bureau.
Absolutely.
But, maybe you need to do a second job. You know,
Right, to
is
help
there,
dig out. Yeah.
yeah, to help get yourself out of where you are. Or maybe you need to sell some of your personal belongings that, you have that maybe is worth some money, or, just to start, getting some cash available to you. And there are laundry services, and apps out there for laundry services that, you can make some decent money at doing other people's laundry. And,
Yeah.
a lot of times you don't think about it, but think back in the day when, people used to do other people's laundry because they
Oh
didn't
yeah.
have a
Yeah.
washing machine,
Oh yeah.
or, well, now with the apps out there on the phone and you sign up and, you have a washing machine and it works, and, you're home with the kids and you want to pick up some extra money, maybe you do
There are
that.
lots of little things like this
Mm-hmm.
out there. I mean, take a look. If you're somebody who has a decent microphone at home, you can do voiceover work. There's a lot of stuff for that. You can,
Mm-hmm.
the technology, though we had an episode on that, is not always great in this situation. You can find
Yeah,
some things to do there.
you can. There's a lot more available today
Yeah.
than there was, prior. But finances really are a touchy subject in any relationship. It's tough on marriages. It's tough,
Number one cause of divorce, right?
it
Or at
is.
least
It
it, it
is
is. It
way.
is
It's
the
way.
number one, right?
Yeah, it is, and it's tough. So one of the things you have to learn to do is you have to talk to each other about where you're at.
Sure.
When you get married, it says the two become one. Well, that includes your bank accounts and that includes everything. So everybody has a true
Mm-hmm.
picture of where you stand. And I think it's important that you get it, overcome it instead of letting it overcome you. And so you have to work together on a plan. And if that means you make some sacrifices to, do what you need to do,
Yeah.
then that's, really what you
Because as
do.
hard as those conversations are, the fact that you have two people, more
Mm-hmm.
than likely two income streams, there is some flexibility in that to kind
Mm-hmm.
of help each other out
Right.
in these situations.
Right. Right. And it is important. But you know what? If you have to file bankruptcy, it's okay. You have to
Well, right.
realize that,
Yeah.
you know, you have to do what you have to
Yeah.
do to protect your family and to protect,
Yeah.
your kids, or whatever you need to do.
Because a lot of
So,
the situations,
mhm,
someone made a mistake maybe when they were younger, or
mhm,
we talked about things that happen.
mhm.
People going bankrupt to pay for a loved one's medical care
Right.
and things
Right.
like that.
And sometimes there's nobody to pay for the funeral, and they charge it on their credit card to pay for the funeral, and then they lose their job, and then you have the snowball effect. And you really have to be diligent and be mindful. And if you have to file, we I like to think that if somebody is filing for bankruptcy, that they have done a checklist. They have done everything that they could to not, even if it was, trying to borrow money from a family member or trying to do something to keep yourself out of it. And if you've had to file, then we know there was no other resource,
Right.
or no
Right.
other recourse for you to
No,
take to
that's
try and
important to
turn the
remember.
ship.
And I'm
No.
sure, if I were to file bankruptcy, you
Hmm.
would provide me a whole checklist. But I'm sure
Oh
out
yeah.
there on the internet somewhere there's
Oh yeah. And your
some
attorney.
checklists, and you can find in your attorney as
Yeah,
well.
your
Yep.
attorney's list will provide
Because
you with
talking to attorney
everything.
about bankruptcy does
Hmm.
not mean you file. You
Right.
haven't filed until you filed, so there
Right.
might be,
Right.
things
Hmm.
you can do or things they can find, and
Right.
you'll have to pay them a little money for their time, I'm
Right.
sure. But
Yeah. Yeah. But and maybe there's new programs out there,
oh,
and
sure,
so
yeah.
things are always on a constant change.
There is, a lot of stuff happened during the pandemic. A lot of
Hmm.
lot of financial programs for businesses in particular, but
Right.
I don't know what all is out there.
Yeah, yeah. And so you have to do some research and you have to figure out,
Yeah,
because, maybe it is as simple as a consolidation loan with, some of that equity and paying everything off, as long as you cut up your credit cards and you have to stop the bleeding,
sure, yes.
somewhere. And so you look at all avenues, to see what's the best. So that's kind of just a snapshot of what bankruptcy chapter 7 and chapter 13 is like, in some of the processes. But if you have any questions, talk to an attorney, talk to maybe somebody that has filed bankruptcy, or do some research online, or go
Sure.
to the library and pull a book out and see what's available.
And there would be a ton of resources on that.
Oh yeah, there's
Internet library.
mhm. And you know what? There's federal codes. You can look up things yourself on the federal
Yeah.
bankruptcy codes. You can look up Ohio State, Ohio Revised Code. Each state has their own codes, and your local jurisdictions, your local rules. There's things out there, and your attorney. And if you can't afford one, then check um, the local bar associations to see if anybody is doing pro bono work
Right, or
or
some other way to
legal
pay them
aid.
late,
Yeah, yeah. And one thing about a Chapter 13 plan is that your attorney's fees can be put into a Chapter 13 plan. And so they get paid from the Chapter 13 trustee as well. So it's not like you have to have that money right up front. Now the attorneys are considered an administrative expense, so they're one of the first to get paid, which is rightfully
Oh,
so.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. They're doing work actively
correct.
on the thing. That's their
Right.
job. So,
Correct. But if you are in dire straits, check with legal aid and check with the bar association and see, if anybody's doing pro bono, because
yeah.
some states require that the attorneys do a certain number of pro bono hours, in a
So
year or two
there's more
years or
than
three
likely a way
years.
for you to get
Right. Right.
a quality
Right.
attorney.
Right. So, but anyways, we know this is a touchy subject, and
Sure.
but we also know that people are struggling financially, and so we just want to try and share our information that we have with you, and to trying to get you to think and point you in the right directions for help or things to consider. So, but we want to thank you though for joining us today for the Greg and Leisa Show.
Yep.
And we do appreciate you being part of our YouTube family.
And Facebook, if that's where you watch.
Yep, and Facebook. But, if you could take a minute to leave a comment or send us an email at the Greg and Leisa Show at gmail.com to let us know in some small way that maybe we are giving you some information that's useful. Give us a thumbs up, like us, because we do spend.
Or you know what? Even on that, if you don't like something, let us know about that too in the comments. We can certainly adjust things and be flexible.
Correct. And
as long as we're all adults about the situation.
Right. Or if you have a topic suggestion.
Sure.
Yeah. Because we do spend, a lot of time getting our information together and preparing, because we want to give you, the best information that we have. So if we could hear from you, it would really, be helpful. And if you could give us some topic ideas, we have a ton yet, so don't worry about us running out of topics. But we would like to touch on something that really is of interest to you as well.
If you suggest something, more than likely we'll take it, and that list will wait, or maybe it is something that we already have, and we just do that one a little sooner.
Right. So, because we are better than a quarter of the way, I think, into our year commitment.
Yes. Did we even tell them about the year commitment?
I don't think so.
No, we didn't. So when we started this, we talked about, doing it for at least a year and kind of seeing how it went. So we are, getting close to a quarter of the way there.
Yeah, we are. So, but anyways, we want to thank you again. It's a new year, 2024. And we hope that this year is full of blessings and fun and happiness for you and your family. And if it's not, we want to pray for you. And we, are always here to pray. But we hope that you do what we do, which is always seek God first and find a good Bible-based church. And in fact, you know what I heard today on the way over here is there is actually somebody submitted in legislation that in the classrooms that the 10 Commandments be listed, because the 10 Commandments are run pretty much hand in hand with the Constitution, and that we do need to have a better way to live, and we need to start teaching. If they're not getting it at home, then they need to get it somewhere. They need to see it somewhere.
Because if you really think about it, like
a lot of them go against hand in hand with our laws.
We can't force anybody into religion, but if you look at what the 10 Commandments are, and maybe you take the word thou out of it, and you take some of that older translation stuff out of it, and I'm not saying that's bad, but if you show that list kind of cleared up to your average atheist or agnostic individual, they might look and say, oh, that's a good idea.
Well, not only that, a lot of it is common sense. It's like honor your father and your mother. Well, that's about teaching respect. And we have to teach our kids respect and integrity, and thou shalt not lie. And it's like, that's a common sense too. Who wants, we have to teach our kids the right way. But anyways, I was encouraged by that, and I
Yeah.
hope that legislation
Yeah.
passes, and that I like to err on the side of hope for this world.
Sure.
Even though we know what Revelation says, but there's always hope until you take your last breath. And that's what we want, is to always have that hope and that light for Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Greg, what do you think? Got anything else to add tonight?
No, I mean, we talked about the Ten Commandments, and earlier I said there was of the last question, and it wasn't. So there's there goes one.
That was just an error.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we hope you have a
Yep.
great weekend and a great week ahead of you. And, seek wise counsel, because the more wise counsel that you seek and the more information you have, the better prepared you are to make an informed decision.
Absolutely.
So get ahead of everything, take that first step, be proactive, and may God richly bless you this week.
All right. See you, everybody.
Bye.